shout. He didn't point fingers. All he did was raise his hand to calmly correct something that wasn't true. That single act changed everything. A moment later, the sheriff struck him, and right when the tension reached its breaking point, the doors opened, and a high-ranking U.S. official stepped into the gym, clapping. You ever been in a school gym so crowded that it felt like the walls were alive, like they were holding their breath right along with everyone inside? That's what it felt like that Friday morning at Lincoln High School, deep in the heart of Pine Ridge, Georgia, a quiet town, the kind where folks leave their doors unlocked and wave to the mailman, a town where people still greet each other by name in the grocery store. That morning, the entire community had gathered for what was supposed to be a feel-good tradition. Heroes Day, a local ceremony where first responders, firefighters, EMTs, and law enforcement were honored alongside a handful of model students. Something simple, something safe. Parents sat shoulder to shoulder in squeaky folding chairs, fanning themselves against the warmth of the gym lights. Teachers buzzed between rows of students in matching school uniforms, tightening ties, fixing collars, whispering reminders to behave. The air was thick with the scent of floor polish, cologne, and cinnamon rolls from the cafeteria. Voices echoed everywhere, snippets of conversation bouncing off the walls like restless energy. 15-year-old Jalen McCoy stood near the front, hands clasped in front of him, quietly rocking on the balls of his feet. His khaki pants were freshly pressed, his shirt buttoned to the top. The haircut, sharp, clean, and fresh from Earl's barbershop, had cost his uncle $40 and a 2-hour wait. Jalen looked ready for anything, but he wasn't nervous, just attentive, aware. Jalen had never been the type to stir trouble. He didn't raise his voice, didn't break rules. He was the kind of student teachers whispered about in the staff lounge. That one's going places, straight A's, captain of the chess team, debate club champion. He was precise with his words, careful with his thoughts, and thoughtful in how he moved through the world. But that morning, he felt something off, a shift. His mother had squeezed his hand tighter than usual when she dropped him off. Her voice had that edge, soft but heavy. "Be careful today, baby." He didn't ask questions, just nodded. What could go wrong at a school assembly? Near the podium, Principal Denton tapped the mic and winced at the screech of feedback. "Thanks for coming, everyone," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Today we celebrate not only our incredible students, but also the brave individuals who protect this town. Please join me in welcoming Sheriff Wade Turlington." Polite applause rolled across the gym. Some parents stood. A few students clapped louder than the rest, mostly those whose parents worked at the sheriff's office. And then he appeared. Sheriff Turlington stepped onto the stage like he owned it. Broad shoulders, buzz cut, mirrored sunglasses, heavy boots that echoed with every step. He walked like a man used to being watched, used to being obeyed. He took off his shades slowly and spoke directly into the mic. "When I got the invite to speak here," he said, voice deep, measured, "I knew I had to clear my schedule, because what I see in this gym is the future of Pine Ridge. And every future needs structure. It needs discipline. It needs respect. And respect starts with knowing your place." Some heads nodded. A few parents smiled proudly. But several teachers froze. Expressions tightened. Something about his tone shifted the air. He wasn't just talking about rules anymore. He was drawing lines. "Back in my day," he continued, "we were taught to stand when an elder walked in. We didn't talk back, and we didn't rewrite history just to make ourselves feel better." That last line hit the room like a stone dropped in a pond. The ripples spread fast. Some students blinked. Some parents looked around. But Sheriff Turlington wasn't finished. "There are folks out there now," he said, "trying to paint this country as built on cruelty, as if law enforcement was always the villain, as if hard work didn't build this nation, as if slavery was the foundation." That was it. Jalen's hand rose, slowly, steadily. One hand, palm open, respectful. But the silence that followed felt like the breath was sucked out of the room. Even Sheriff Turlington stopped mid-sentence. "Something you want to say, son?" he asked, his voice flat. The way he looked down at Jalen, it wasn't just dismissive, it was confrontational, like he couldn't believe a kid had dared to interrupt him. Jalen didn't flinch. "Yes, sir," he said. "With all due respect, what you said about slavery not being the foundation of this country, it's not accurate. There's overwhelming evidence, economic data, historical records. This isn't about feelings, it's about facts." You could have heard a pin drop. One teacher, Miss Burney, Jalen's history coach, straightened in her seat. She knew that tone, knew the precision in his words, knew he wasn't just reacting, he was standing on truth. But what happened next? No one in that gym could have predicted. Not the students, not the parents, not even Jalen, and definitely not the sheriff. Slavery wasn't just some side chapter, Jalen said, his voice still steady despite the weight in the room. It was foundational to the economy, especially in the South. That's not opinion, it's historical fact. Sheriff Turlington's expression hardened. He cut him off, voice low, slow, condescending. "Boy, I don't think anybody asked for a lecture." The air grew dense. You could feel it, how the entire room shifted. Miss Burney, Jalen's history teacher, took a small step forward. Her lips parted as if to say something, but she stopped. So did everyone else. Eyes glanced left and right, waiting for someone else to speak first. Jalen didn't back down. His voice softened, but not out of fear, out of clarity. "I'm not lecturing," he said quietly. "I just think, if we're talking about leadership, then it should start with truth." The sheriff scoffed. "You think?" he said. "Well, there's your first mistake. You don't get to think in here when grown folks are talking." A few chuckles slipped through the gym. Not loud, not proud, just nervous, confused, uncertain. Laughter that didn't belong in a room like that. Jalen looked down for a second, cheeks burning. But he didn't move. He didn't sit. He stayed standing. "I'm not trying to be disrespectful," he said again, slower now. "I care about facts, that's all. I care about honesty." Then it happened. That kind of silence you don't forget. The kind where time freezes. The kind where even a dropped pen would sound like thunder. Sheriff Turlington stepped off the stage. One step, then another, then a third. Now he was standing right in front of Jalen. So close, the boy had to lift his chin just to see the man's face. The sheriff's boots squeaked against the polished gym floor. His lip curled, but the smirk that followed carried no warmth, only warning. "You care about truth?" he said. "You sure you're not just trying to be clever?" "No, sir." "You calling me a liar?" "No, sir, I'm saying what you said wasn't accurate." That's when it happened. Crack. An open palm across Jalen's face. The sound exploded through the gym like a firework. His glasses flew sideways, one lens popping out and spinning across the floor. Jalen staggered. He didn't fall. He caught himself against the bleachers, his mouth open, not from pain, but shock, as if the very breath had been slapped out of him. Gasps erupted. Not the kind you hear in movies. These were real, sudden, guttural, human. Phones came out. Recording apps opened. A mother whispered, "Did that just..." Someone else, "Oh my God." A quiet sob cut through from somewhere in the back. And Sheriff Turlington? He didn't flinch. He didn't apologize. He stood there like a man who thought he'd just taught a lesson, like he was proud of what he'd done, like this was how you handle dissent. He turned, brushed off his hands, and walked back to the mic as if he'd just finished mowing the lawn. Then, clap. One slow, firm clap. Then another. Then a third. The sheriff froze. Heads turned. And that's when she walked in. The gym doors creaked open at the far end, and the entire world seemed to stop breathing. A woman walked in, tall, composed, with shoulders that carried authority like armor. Her hair was pulled tight into a bun, her deep green uniform sharp as glass, the silver stars on her chest reflecting the gym lights like steel. Angela Brookshire. Two plainclothes officers flanked her like shadows. She didn't smile. She didn't speak. She didn't rush. She just kept clapping. Slow, clean, controlled. Each clap rang through the gym like a verdict. Sheriff Turlington's face lost its color. She walked the entire length of the gym, passing the rows of stunned students and frozen parents. She stopped at the front row, where Jalen was still standing, his glasses askew, his cheek burning red, but his back straight. His hands shook, just slightly, but he didn't move. He didn't break. Brookshire looked at him, then at the sheriff. Then she took the mic. Her voice, calm, precise, cold as ice. "That," she said, "is exactly why I came here today." Silence, pure, absolute. Sheriff Turlington blinked, then tried to collect himself. "I wasn't told you'd be attending." "Clearly," she interrupted without turning toward him. Then she faced the crowd. Parents, teachers, students, administrators. Some were already live streaming. Others were frozen in place. "My name is Angela Brookshire," she said, her voice steady and controlled. "Secretary of Defense, born and raised 6 blocks from this gym. Lincoln High graduate, class of '92, Bronze Star, 2 deployments, and more years than I care to count cleaning up the messes men like this leave behind." She didn't yell. She didn't need to. Turlington opened his mouth again. "Now hold on." She lifted a hand. He stopped cold. "I came here today to speak about leadership," she said, her voice cutting like a scalpel. "About courage," Brookshire said, her voice ringing clear. "About what it really means to serve a country where not every child gets the same protection under the law, not even in a school gym." The room had gone still again. I was going to stand here and tell these kids that sometimes doing the right thing means speaking up, even when your voice shakes, even when it's not safe, but I don't need to say that anymore. She turned to Jalen, her eyes locked onto his, because one of them already did. A wave of sound moved through the room like a rising tide. Murmurs turned to claps, then real applause. Not slow, not cautious, genuine. People started standing, parents, teachers, even a few students, one by one, until the bleachers were shaking from the sound. You could feel it. That electricity. That shift. Sheriff Turlington's jaw clenched. He started backing toward the podium, searching the crowd for Principal Denton. "You people have no idea what kind of disrespect we deal with." "You just slapped a child," Brookshire interrupted sharply. "In a public school, on camera, for telling the truth." Her words cut like a knife. She turned to Denton, who looked like he was praying the floor would open up and swallow him whole. "Mr. Denton," she said calmly, "I hope you understand the seriousness of what just happened, because the Department of Defense does, and so does the Department of Justice." He stammered, "We'll be reviewing it immediately. This was all a misunderstanding." She didn't blink. There are no misunderstandings when the cameras are rolling. Then she stepped down from the stage and walked directly to Jalen. "You all right?" she asked. Jalen nodded, barely. She reached into her pocket, pulled out a folded handkerchief, and offered it to him gently. "Don't ever let someone silence you for telling the truth," she said, her voice softer now. "That's how empires fall." Jalen swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am." She leaned closer, whispered just for him. "You handled that better than most grown men I've met." A faint, tired smile tugged at his mouth. In the crowd, his mother, Charlene, stood with a trembling hand over her heart, tears running down her cheeks. Meanwhile, Turlington tried to slip off the stage unnoticed, but the security detail had already closed in. One officer stood at the steps, the other quietly blocked the gym exit. The man who slapped a teenager in front of hundreds now had nowhere to go. But what happened after the cameras stopped rolling? That's when things really exploded. The clip hit the internet before the gym had even emptied. Tariq, a sophomore known for streaming everything from food fights to hallway dance-offs, had caught the whole moment. Clean shot, steady frame, crystal clear audio. 10 minutes later, it was all over TikTok, X, Instagram, and somebody's uncle's group chat in Tallahassee. By the time Jalen walked through his front door that afternoon, the video had 2.3 million views. And Sheriff Wade Turlington? He was trending, but not for the reasons he used to enjoy. News vans rolled into Pine Ridge before the sun set. CNN, MSNBC, even the local Fox affiliate, all hunting for a statement, a soundbite, anything. They knocked on neighbors' doors. A reporter from NPR tried to interview the lunch lady. Kids at Lincoln High started getting DMS from journalists asking if they had other footage. Jalen's face was everywhere. Half the country was calling him courageous. The other half, not so kind. That night, his family turned off the porch light. They took shifts watching the windows, not because they were paranoid, but because someone had already driven past yelling slurs. Another car tossed a crumpled flag onto their lawn. Charlene called the police. It took them 3 hours to show up. When they did, the responding officer, who once played high school football with Sheriff Turlington, offered nothing but a shrug. "We're doing the best we can." Jalen looked at his mom. Her voice stayed calm, but her hands were shaking. That night, she made him sleep in her room, just in case. Back at school, the board scrambled. They called an emergency meeting. The superintendent issued a vague statement that sounded like it had been stitched together by a lawyer and a sleep-deprived PR intern. "We regret the incident that occurred on school grounds and are committed to conducting a full review." No names, no accountability, just the incident. But inside the school, it was anything but quiet. Teachers whispered behind closed doors. Some were afraid to speak. Others didn't hold back. Ms. Burney wore a pin the next day. Bold, visible, proud. And when the principal passed her in the hallway, she didn't flinch. One of the gym coaches, a former officer, loudly defended Turlington in the staff lounge. But something had already changed. The story was no longer about one student speaking up. It was about what happens next when everyone starts listening. In the teacher's lounge, things boiled over. A gym coach, ex-law enforcement, was defending Turlington with raised voice, saying people didn't understand how hard the job was. But all the janitor said, quiet and steady, was, "Man hit a kid, ain't nothing to defend." That shut the room down. In the cafeteria, things weren't any calmer. Students argued between bites of pizza and chocolate milk. Some called Jalen a hero. Others said he was making it all about something it wasn't. A junior girl from the front office posted online, "He shouldn't have mouthed off. Don't care who he is." Bad move. The post was screenshotted, reposted, stitched, and ratioed into next week. Within hours, her comment had its own hashtag, and not the flattering kind. Even the adults couldn't agree. In the Pine Ridge Moms Facebook group, the comments were a minefield. One mom, Miss Denise, who ran the community bake sale, posted, "That boy was disrespected, plain and simple." Another mom replied, "I was raised to never interrupt adults. Respect goes both ways." 10 comments later, someone brought up Colin Kaepernick, and the whole thread detonated. But Secretary Brookshire, she didn't fade away. She held a press conference 2 days later, right on the school's front steps. Cameras everywhere, mics in her face, sun in her eyes. "I'm not sugarcoating anything," she said. "A grown man hit a student for correcting a historical lie. That's not discipline. That's abuse." Reporters pounced. "Are you calling for Sheriff Turlington to resign?" "I'm calling," she answered, "for real accountability, not silence, not excuses, and definitely not threats." She didn't blink, didn't flinch, didn't step back once. That same afternoon, the sheriff's office released a statement of its own. Turlington didn't apologize. He said he regretted that the situation escalated and claimed he acted on instinct to maintain order. Instinct? As if a 15-year-old speaking truth was some kind of threat. Meanwhile, in the McCoy house, the fear wasn't online anymore. It was right outside. By Monday morning, Pine Ridge felt like it had been split down the center by a dull axe, and it didn't break clean. On one side, that boy stood up for what's right. That's what courage looks like. On the other, he should have known his place. The division didn't follow race or age the way you'd expect. Some people surprised you, others didn't. At Earl's barbershop, where gossip spread faster than fire, the room was tense. Big Reggie was pacing in the corner, voice rising. If that was my nephew, I'd be sitting in a holding cell right now. Earl, standing behind his chair with arms crossed, looked up. Then what? Reggie paused. Then at least that sheriff would know what fear feels like. Mr. Landry, retired Army, lived in Pine Ridge over 50 years, shook his head slowly. Anger won't fix it, he said. What fixes it is not letting them get away with it. Use your head, not your fists. Across town, inside Mason's Coffee and Copy, the conversation was different, quieter. A group of church moms huddled over tea and scones. I just think we don't know the whole story, one whispered. Boys today can be real mouthy. Another leaned in, lips tight. But he's still a child. That sheriff hit a child. The pause said more than their words, and the way they said, boy, told you exactly where they stood. That evening, the mayor held a town hall. It was packed, standing room only. People filled the aisles, spilled out the doors, lined the steps. Every media outlet for 200 miles had a camera rolling. Mayor Hollings wiped his brow, his voice wavering. This community is hurting, he said. I've known Sheriff Turlington for over 20 years. He's a good man. This is a complex situation. That's when Charlene McCoy stood up. No microphone, no permission, just pain and steel in her voice. Tell me, she said, loud enough for the cameras to hear, what's so complex about a grown man slapping my child? Silence. Again. I sent my son to school to be educated, not humiliated, not turned into a headline. So keep your complex. What I want is accountability. People began clapping. Others stared at their feet. In the back row, Sheriff Turlington sat with his arms folded and his jaw locked tight. He didn't say a word. Back at school, Jalen tried to keep a low profile. But how could he? He couldn't walk 10 steps without someone whispering, "Yo, that was brave." Or, "You scared?" Or, "What happens now?" He didn't have the answers. He didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted to pass geometry and eat his sandwich without becoming a headline. But that day at lunch, he sat across from Dante, one of the few kids who never lied to make things easy. Dante opened a juice box and said, "You know you messed up their little fantasy, right?" Jalen blinked. "What fantasy? That this school, this town, the whole setup, that it's fair, that it treats everyone the same. You stood up and said, 'Hey, this isn't right,' and that scared them more than anything." Jalen looked down. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble," Dante shrugged. Trouble usually means you're doing something right. That night, Jalen couldn't sleep. Not out of fear. He'd already faced that. It was something else, something bigger. Articles were calling him a symbol of youth activism, a voice for accountability. They used words like civil rights, and he was only 15. He didn't want a spotlight. He just wanted the truth to matter. But truth has a way of making people very, very uncomfortable. The sheriff's office tried to carry on like nothing happened. On Tuesday, Turlington showed up at work, holding a coffee like he hadn't slapped a student in front of 500 witnesses. But people noticed. 3 deputies called out sick. One handed in a quiet resignation. The county commissioner called a closed-door meeting to evaluate leadership. Meanwhile, parents flooded the school board with calls. Some said they were pulling their kids out of Lincoln High. Others demanded that Turlington be arrested. But in a small southern town, arresting a sheriff? That's not easy. He wasn't just part of the system. He was the system. That's when Angela Brookshire came back. No press, no cameras this time, just her and her legal team behind the locked doors of City Hall. No one knows what she said. But by Thursday morning, a statement went out. Sheriff Wade Turlington is on unpaid administrative leave pending investigation. He didn't apologize, didn't post a video, just vanished. Rumors spread fast. Someone said he lawyered up. Another claimed they saw him at a bar muttering about how the town turned on him. But the attention didn't fade. It grew. Jalen started getting letters. From Seattle, from Detroit, from a retired history teacher in Kansas who wrote, "You reminded me why I started teaching." Sure, some messages were ugly, but most were filled with respect, encouragement, and hope. Still, Jalen stayed quiet until the town forum. It was held in the same gym where it all happened. This time, it was full for a different reason. The school board invited the public to speak. Jalen hadn't planned on saying anything, but when his name was called and every face turned to him, he stood. He walked to the microphone slowly, took a breath. "My name is Jalen McCoy. I'm 15, and I didn't come here to make anyone mad. I didn't come to disrespect anyone." He looked up. "I just told the truth." A few claps, nods. "When I raised my hand that day, I thought we were allowed to ask questions. Isn't that what school's supposed to be? Learning, challenging ideas. But instead, I got slapped. And now people argue about whether that was justified. Like my voice only matters if I say the right thing." The room held still. "But that's not respect, that's fear." More silence. "I'm not angry. I'm not bitter. But I want people to think about what it says, that a kid can speak up, calmly, respectfully, and get hit for it. And adults still have to debate whether that's okay." He stepped back. Applause followed him to his seat. Not just polite applause, standing applause. In the crowd, Charlene wrapped her arms around her son. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "You didn't just stand up, baby. You stood tall." And this time, Jalen smiled. A real one. Not fear, not relief. Pride. Strength. 2 weeks later, Sheriff Turlington resigned. No press conference. No apology. Just a typed letter full of vague phrases like "distraction from my duties" and "difficult decision." And just like that, he was gone. But something else remained. Something stronger. At Lincoln High, teachers started updating their history lessons. The curriculum shifted. Dialogues opened. The school launched a new student-led leadership council. Jalen was one of the first members. And Miss Burney, she got a promotion. Principal Burney now, a title no one questioned anymore. But the real shift wasn't in promotions or punishments. It was in something harder to see. The silence breaking. The truth refusing to stay hidden. The feeling that maybe, just maybe, something had finally cracked open in Pine Ridge. And this time, people were really looking. The day the new sheriff was sworn in, the town didn't feel fixed. It didn't feel healed, but it felt different. People showed up, not for the ceremony, not for the photos, but because they cared. Folding chairs lined the courthouse lawn. Teenagers leaned against pickup trucks. Elders stood with arms crossed and eyes forward. The new sheriff? Donna Marks, former state investigator, a reputation for fairness, a spine like steel. The first black woman ever to wear the badge in that county. Her first public words were simple. No badge should make a man forget how to treat people. And no child should be afraid to tell the truth. Back at Lincoln High, life didn't go back to normal, because no one wanted normal anymore. History class shifted. Lessons got deeper. Students spoke up more, not less. Teachers stopped rushing past uncomfortable questions. They leaned into them. And in the counseling office, Mr. Franklin started a new monthly student forum. The first topic? What does respect really look like? Jalen sat in the front row. Not just a student now, but a symbol of quiet strength, of what happens when a voice refuses to fold. He wasn't trying to lead. He didn't chase attention. But he became a reminder that truth has a cost, that courage can come from the quietest person in the room, and that if you see something wrong, you speak. But here's what most people didn't see. Jalen still had trouble sleeping. He still flinched sometimes when someone raised their voice too fast. Still asked his mom, "Am I doing too much?" when reporters reached out. One evening, as the sky turned orange over Pine Ridge, he sat on the porch with his mother. Charlene put down her mug, looked him in the eye, and said, "You didn't do anything wrong, baby. You showed something right. There's a difference." And he nodded, letting that truth settle into his chest. The town gave him a certificate, a scholarship from an alumni fund no one even knew existed, a small ceremony. But none of that mattered as much as one moment. It happened on a regular afternoon, in a hallway still lit by flickering fluorescents. A kid named Kenny, quiet, always kept to himself, walked up after class. He didn't say much. Just, "Hey, thanks for that day." Jalen blinked. "For what?" Kenny shrugged. "For speaking up. I didn't know we were allowed to do that." Jalen smiled. We always were. They just made it feel like we weren't. That line stuck with him. That night, he wrote it on a sticky note and pressed it to his bedroom mirror, right next to a photo of Secretary Brookshire shaking his hand. That summer, she came back. No cameras, no press, just her and him. They walked the halls of Lincoln High in silence for a while. Then she said, "You changed this place." He looked down. "I didn't mean to." She smiled. "That's usually how the best change happens." Before she left, she handed him a worn paperback. James Baldwin, dog-eared, underlined. "Keep learning," she said. "Keep questioning. And when the world tells you to shut up, speak louder." He didn't answer. He didn't have to, because maybe that's the biggest lesson of all. This story, it was never just about a sheriff, or a slap, or a school. It was about power, about fear, about how we treat each other when we think no one's watching, and how fast that changes when someone hits record. It's about what it takes to raise your hand when it's easier to look down, about how telling the truth, even quietly, can shake the walls of a building built to silence you, and about who claps when truth is spoken, and who panics. You may never be in Jalen's shoes, but one day, you'll see something wrong. And when that moment comes, will you stay quiet, or will you speak? Even if your voice shakes, because change, it doesn't start with noise. It starts with one voice, yours. If you made it this far, then this story meant something to you. So don't let it stop here. Share it, talk about it, ask questions, listen. And above all, support the kids, the truth tellers, the quiet ones with raised hands, because the world needs more of them, and maybe one of them is watching.